Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio. Your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Hello and welcome. Every time we board an airplane, we make an extraordinary assumption. And that assumption is that the air that we are breathing, that is going into our lungs, is safe. And most of us never think about it. What if there are people who have been thinking about it, people who have been negatively impacted about this, from this? It's changed their life. And what if people who had the power to make a decision didn't do anything? We are going to be talking about this today. I'm very excited. My guest today was here 4 years ago, I think, maybe it was 5. And he has been bringing to light what has been going on in the commercial airline industry, from my understanding, for 70 years. But his point of knowledge is back to 2006. And so I'm going to introduce him after I bring him out. But his name is Captain John Hoyte. Let's welcome him. John, nice to see you again.
Hi, Jacalyn. Good afternoon, good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. So I know that this topic that we haven't actually named yet, but we're keeping it simple for people who fly all the time. People get onto commercial flights all the time, and we're told that there's this recycled air. 50% of it is going through some filtration system, I guess, and 50% is from the outside. I'm not sure. Maybe you can talk to us about that and tell us what your experience is with airlines and how you got involved with this before we talk about what the actual initiative is.
Okay, so actually the air isn't filtered. The air, it comes off the engine. It's called bleed air. It's bled off the engine. And effectively, the air goes in the front of the engine, halfway down, it's pressurized, and then big pipes about 6 inches across pipe it into the aircraft. But it's not filtered, it's not monitored at all. So it's raw air straight off the engine. And actually, the recycled air is filtered, but that's another story. So yeah, you're dealing with pretty unpleasant air coming off the engine, which picks up oil contamination in the engine. And the oil contains chemicals called organophosphates, and they're nerve agents. And it used to be on the tin, do not breathe the contaminants, but effectively you're breathing contaminated air from the engine. And then carbon monoxide. There's a range of chemicals, and often it's a visible fume event, so you can see. You can't see your passenger next door. Well, that's not very healthy, is it? And that's what you call a fume event. Okay.
Thank you, John. And we are sharing your website right now, which we have in the comments, but for people who are listening only. And according to your website, you are a former training captain. What does that mean?
Okay, so I spent my career aerial crop dusting, for 7 years in the 80s, and knew about organophosphates and didn't get any ill health and aerial firefighting. So I sort of wanted a safer job. So that's when I changed career in 1987, and I flew DC-3 Dakotas, the old World War II transport aircraft for a couple of years. So that again, all these aircraft were below 10,000 feet, so you're not getting pressurized air. And then in 1989, I decided to fly jets, because I wanted a safer type of flying, I suppose. So I joined a company called TNT in the UK, and they're flying a 4-engine jet called the BAE 146. But these aircraft go up to 30,000 feet. So they use pressurized air. And I remember them telling me about it at the training. And so I just assumed, they knew what they're talking about. But within 6 months, I was very sick from actually fume events in the aircraft on the ground, from a small engine at the back called an auxiliary power unit, APU. And more or less every flight, from the first start, the aircraft were filled with white smoke, and that's what you're exposed to. And I ended up as a training captain in about 2000, but I was well cooked by then. I got terribly sick, and didn't know why until 2006 when I was told about it. And, it's just other pilots telling you about it, really.
And John, in addition to your experience flying aircraft, you're also an author, and you are the founder of the Aerotoxic Association. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. What led you from just flying to then becoming someone raising their hand and saying, wait a minute, something is not right. I don't feel well. Other people who've been flying aircraft, they don't feel well. Passengers don't feel well. And as recently as this year, there are now, there's movement within the United States, and there has been acceptance by France, I understand.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Let's talk about what led you to start the Aerotoxic Association.
Well, I'd been terribly ill for 15 years and then was tested. I was a BALPA union pilot, and they tested 27 pilots. I was one of them, and we're all highly positive. So that's it wasn't rocket science, and that was 20 years ago. So I worked it out then. And again, it was all written down at the time. So I think it was first proposed in 1999. An American doctor, Harry Hoffman, a French forensic scientist called Dr. Chris Balloway, and an Australian, toxicologist, Professor Chris Winder. So they worked it out in 1999. So what we're talking about is about a quarter of a century old, really. And they called it Aerotoxic Syndrome. And then my union, BALPA, they had a pilot called Captain Julian Soddy, who was terribly sick, flying the same aeroplane. So he had a conference in 2005 to get to the truth. Well, that's how I knew about it in 2006, because, it's like the open secret, really, what's going on. So I thought I should help other people. And so I started an association to do that at the House of Parliament in London, and several other people came and joined me on that day. So that's how it all began.
Thank you for sharing that. And also thank you for being the voice of the voiceless and people who are afraid to come forward. What are some of the symptoms that you experienced and that others have experienced that led to this?
Yeah, good question. So I think in simple terms, it's dizziness, headache, and fatigue all at once. But I had many other symptoms, ringing in my ears and head, and hot and cold physical symptoms. But people have a different list, obviously, because everybody gets different exposures. But that's in simple terms: dizziness, headache, and fatigue all at the same time. And let's face it, that's jet lag, isn't it? And fatigue is still a very serious issue in the airline industry. So a lot of it will be down to this, but they don't want people to know about it, really.
What's quite fascinating to me is we have another show here called This is Phlox. It's about fluoroquinolone toxicity. And some of what I've taken away from it is people who experience real illnesses from taking antibiotics, and no one wants to listen. People
Sure.
tell them they're crazy, they're insane, and then they get labeled as insane in the system.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like some of that is also going on, that you have real impact from flying
definitely
on a jet, and people are saying no, it's not that, it must be something else.
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? I mean, it's pretty inconvenient. You can get on a flight and come off sick, but that's what's going on. But there's two types of exposure. I did 16 years flying the 146, so I was well cooked for 15 of the 16 years, and failed safe in 2005, and then didn't know what was going on. For 6 months until you tested, you don't know. But there's a lot of examples of one-off exposures where you get a visible fume event. You can't see your fellow passengers on board, and that's as a result of an oil leak in the engine, a sort of a seal going wrong, and it'll just dump the oil into the aircraft and white smoke. You can't see a passenger, and that's what they call a fume event, and that'll knock you out for your life, and that's really bad news.
With this dirty fume event, and also I read that it smells like dirty socks, something having to do with dirty socks.
Yeah.
I know I've been on flights where I'm like, what is that smell? How do we know when it is this type of event versus something else? Is there a telltale sign?
Well, there are no sensors on board, so it's a big lottery. Nobody really wants to sort of deal with it, and it's become so routine. People just think, oh, it's smelly socks again, and they don't realize what damage it's doing. And I had that for 15 years, and I just wish I'd never flown jets, because that's what's happening, really. So yeah, and they want it reported and all the rest of it, but they just can't do anything about it, so they just shrug their shoulders and say, "Oh, another report, really." So it's just, I've decided to get on with other things. It's just a bit of a pointless exercise, really. It's just become normal, and then they say it's rare. Well, they would do, wouldn't they? They always say the opposite of what it is, really. So yeah.
Well, what if the airline industry and the FAA and whomever else, what if they did say, you know what? We agree with you. We need to make some changes. What type of money, what type of impact are we talking about?
Well, it's huge. It would cripple the industry. You've got an American law professor suing Boeing for 40 million. You don't need too many of those, to wipe out the industry, really. So that's where it is at the moment. It's an existential problem, which they can't really fix. So, that's why I'm trying to distance myself a bit from it, really, because it's not good, is it? I don't know how they're going to deal with it, because they can't really fix it, and that's been understood for many years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is, to your earlier point, and we are sharing the article here, and we do have the link for anyone who wants to take a look at it, is we as humans learn that things can be changed. They can evolve. It's like technology. When we think about the fact that we didn't have phones or we didn't have email, but it takes a lot of money. It's like what's going on in the AI industry now. It takes billions and billions of dollars. So the money can be found. The money can be.
Well, they're going to have to. They're going to have to do something. If they keep saying there's no evidence, that's just crazy, really. That's completely wrong. There've been many court cases. There's one in Australia. The flight attendant was in a flight in 1992, traveling as a passenger, I think, Joanne Turner, and she got sick, and she took them to court, and it took her 18 years to win her case in the High Court of Australia, but she did it eventually, but she didn't do it for the money. That was a sort of token amount. She just did it to prove that the fumes caused her illness, really. So that's the, but there are many other court cases, I promise you, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, really.
One of the things that I think that we're aware of, at least in the media industry, and those for you out there who are not in the media industry, is that when we bring attention to something, it can have severe negative consequences. So you're talking about this flight attendant. People lose everything because they believe.
Lost everything. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say, you've lost everything. So you believe so strongly in this because you want to help mankind and you want to help future generations, that it's had a major impact on you. Tell us about the impact.
So it's affected me for half my life. I was 35 when it first started. I'm 70 now. So, if you lost a leg when you're 35, you'd still not have a leg age 70. And it's just destroyed my life, really. But, it's destroyed it twice, because the first time is the poisoning and the second time is the denial that there's any problem, and, get on with it and keep on going, because that's the message, really. But there are many other passengers, and I've got two passenger friends, Samantha Sabatino, she was in a flight in 2007, and her and her family and 40 passengers. Well, they're unrelated passengers, so you couldn't make that up. So they've been similarly affected. So we're not very popular, really. So Samantha and I are, classic examples. But she was affected by one fume event in 2007. And that information's out there. And then there's another passenger called Karen Isherwood. Well, she was affected on a flight in 2011, Ryanair. And she, went to her MP, who was a chap called Andy Burnham, who's now our Prime Minister, and said, look, I've been made ill. And I remember we went to see him, and, they just shrug their shoulders and say, well, we'll do what we can. But, the man's in office now, so, he has to do something about it. Otherwise, it will destroy the industry.
And what I think is so interesting is, as a layperson, I don't find it that difficult to believe that this is happening. It seems like it could very likely be happening. I mean, why not? But so why
it's become normal? It's become normal. So anything that normalizes, they just shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's the way it is. Just get on with it and talk about something else. It's an omerta. They can't talk about it in the industry. Yeah. So
do you think it comes down basically to politics and money?
Yeah, money and politics, and you feel sorry for them, really, because I'm a professional pilot. I don't enjoy doing this, but, it's something that's destroyed half your life. You have a sort of valid reason, I think, and I don't want to be doing it any longer. It's destroyed me twice, as I said earlier. Yeah.
So we have a lot more to discuss, but what do you want the audience to know about how you are today? What's going on with Captain John today?
Well, I'm broken financially. That's the first thing, from trying to help people. And that's kind of wrong, isn't it? So if you go into a doctor and say, I've got Aerotoxic Syndrome, he won't know what you're talking about. He'll call you crazy or deluded or whatever. He'll say, well, it doesn't exist. And you think, well, but it does exist. And, I quite enjoy doing that, going into these specialist places and say, I've got Aerotoxic Syndrome. And they say, are you allergic to anything? And you say, organophosphates. And they say, what's that? Oh, well, it's just a nerve agent, which is well known about. So, it's like a game, really, you play, but it's a pretty serious game. And, it's time to do other things now. And that's what I'm trying to do, just move on. I think it's like a war. Once you've won the war, you just move on and do other less controversial things. And that's what I'm trying to do now.
And what would you say your limitations are today, physically, psychologically, spiritually, as a result of what you've been going through?
Well, when you're right, you just keep going, and people say you're crazy for doing that. And you think, well, how do you stop? Because one day after the other, you can't forget it. It's just a recurring thing. And you sleep at night, and you wake up in the morning, you think, oh gosh, it's still there, but you can't stop. And that's what people are annoyed by. I think that you just don't give up, because you're right. But you're doing it for other people, you're doing it for children and the next generation of passengers. If they don't fix it, they'll lose the industry. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are on an audio-only platform, we are sharing the Amazon page with John's work. So, John, tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Okay, so the main book is that one second from the right, Aerotoxic Syndrome, Aviation's Darkest Secret. So I had that written in 2014. And I've lost control of my Amazon account. I'm not very good at sort of business side. So, I need somebody to help with that, really. But that sort of was published in 2014. And that's got the name of our Prime Minister in it on page 219. So, 149, sorry. So that's kind of, I'm quite proud of that book, really. Again, it's date stamped. It's kind of what was going on in 12 years ago, really. So that's that book. And then the other book is about my aerial crop spraying, A Tale of Two Ag Pilots. That was written with a friend of mine because I was a crop dusting pilot. And people say, oh, you got poison from that. I think, no, I didn't. It just enabled me to know about the organophosphates and so on. So I can promise you I didn't have any ill health when I was doing that. But it just made me aware of the dangers and I tried to get away from it. So I've got a classic story, really, a joined up story, I think. But I quite enjoyed writing that book with Peter. That was good fun.
One thing that I think is so interesting that you just shared is people love to give their opinions as though you don't know what happened to you or when it happened. People do that all the time. And I just like to encourage people, please don't problem solve when no one asked you to. Believe what someone's telling you because they know themselves better than you know know them, right? Work on yourself, first of all, is what I always say. So, John, this has been going on, you mentioned, since 2006 for your date of knowledge. And you've talked about how it's impacted you physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, as well as
Yeah.
all these other people that is impacted. So where do you go from here right now?
I go to South Australia because that's where I did aerial firefighting in the 1980s, and I really enjoyed that. So I just want to keep a low profile, really, and go off. It's not my problem, and it's not your problem. So that's my. We always aim into the future and know what you're going to do. So that's what I'll be doing. But I've got gold standard evidence. I've got 5 logbooks behind me, and that's gold standard in a public court. So you can actually prove where you were and what you were doing, and that's the system for pilots, really. So it's all pretty gold standard evidence, I think. Yeah.
And tell us what France determined in their court system.
Well, remember they first thought of the idea in 1999. So, it's been there for 25 years, quarter of a century. But essentially, they proved it in 2025 as an occupational health disease. That's what they proved, that you can get it. And that's kind of blindingly obvious. If you go fly an aircraft, there's a risk, for maybe 20% of people that you get sick from the experience. But they're still not telling people, before they go flying, which is a bit strange, really, because all other health and safety things, you get warnings and, beware if you do this in the small print. But there's no warnings before you do, take the occupation up. And I know as a pilot that you just want to fly. It's just such good fun to fly that if somebody tells you, oh, you might get affected, you'll say, oh, well, I'll be lucky and I'll worry about it when it happens. Well, that's too late. By the time it's happened, it's too late, because you can get it on one flight, as we know from Samantha Sabatino and Karen Isherwood. So, yeah, it's a lottery, really. It's Russian roulette, really.
And if you think about it, as a passenger, we have so little responsibility aside from paying, sitting in our seat, and following what we're told to do, right?
Yeah.
But as the pilot or the captain, the co-pilot, the flight attendants, that's a completely different story.
Well,
so if there's something that's going on with the air filtration system and that people are breathing in air that has a potential to have long-term damage,
sure,
that can affect all the passengers as well.
Of course. Well, absolutely. That's the whole point. That's
why
I'm getting away from it.
Yeah, but I don't know that for people who are watching this today, they might think, oh, well, the poor flight attendant or the pilot. No, you're in the plane.
Well,
they're
let's think about the children. Samantha's children are still ill 20 years later after one flight. So that tells you what's going on, really. Yeah, and that's the inconvenient truth, So, we're doing it for the children and for the next generation of flyers, really. If they don't sort it out, they'll lose the industry, I think.
So you have the evidence, you have been championing this initiative, listening to people, putting your own health and safety really secondary so that you can help other people, which happens when you advocate. Let's talk about what exactly is going on with the air in the plane. Talk to us like we're 6 years old and explain. We sit down, we're like breathing, it's no big deal. And then we hear that there's something about the air is circulated or something. I forget what they tell you about the air.
Well, it's like I said earlier, if the air changes color, if you can't see your passenger next door, I think I sent you a picture of a fume event, but you literally can't see your next door passenger, and that's kind of going into your lungs and affecting you, really. And there's no sensors on board. So, they should for the pilots, they should know when there's a fume event and turn the bleed air source off or something. That's what could happen. But without any sensors, how would they know? So it's like the perfect crime scene, really. It's destined to, it's going to happen and does happen. It's happening all the time as we speak now. There's probably 5 fume events going on in the United States, and don't worry, it's just normal. Don't worry, keep going. It's that sort of normalization of deviance. They can't do anything about it, so they just have to, cover it up, basically.
So is it accurate to say, and I'm just, because I don't have knowledge on this, that it only applies to certain planes that were built within this time? It only applies to certain flights that go under this altitude? Like, how does it apply? Could it happen to any commercial private airplane? How does it work?
Okay, so bleed air is the common factor. Any aircraft that uses bleed air, ironically, in the 1950s, the Boeing 707, they designed that with mechanical air pumps, which didn't use bleed air because they knew about carbon monoxide in those days. So, the first jets were safe relatively, DC-8, 707, and then the 727 came in 1962. And that used bleed air straight away. That was the start of the problem. But in those days, everybody smoked, of course, people with pipes and cigars and goodness knows what. And I started flying in 1989, 90, and they were just phasing out smoking then. And some of my captains used to smoke. And I said, well, that got banned in 1990. So everything gets, it's like a timeline really for everything. So, yeah, and that covered it up for many years. But then, of course, these fumes are still being smelt, and people complain and shut up. It's just become normal. And that's where we are now. Really, it's a deadly thing to happen, and it's taken many lives. Many of my friends have died because of this prematurely and got cancers and goodness knows what. There's a website gcaqe.org which you should tell your watch listeners about, and that's kind of got all the key information. But I was at the first meeting in 2006, so here we are 20 years later, and they're still having conferences, going over what they concluded in 2005. So, it's a form of insanity really to keep sort of going over it, the same thing over and over again. There's the GCAQE website, and there's medical protocols on there for the doctors so they can see, how to treat people and so on. So it's 99% been worked out now. It's all a done deal, really.
And for our audience that is on audio only, we are now sharing Global Cabin Air Quality Executive website, which the link is in the notes. John, what is the United States doing in terms of this? Is there any activity or movement forward?
Oh, yeah, it's all happening in the States. So, just a few days ago, there's a Cabin Air Safety Act, which I think Blumenthal and Garamendi, are they congressmen or senators or whatever? Yeah, I think they proposed this Cabin Air Safety Act. And that just tells the FAA to sort of, sort out the bleed air issue, because they're still making aircraft which has got the problem, bleed air. All the Boeings up to the Boeing 787, which went back to using the same technologies as 707, and that's a change of architecture, and it doesn't have the problem. So the Boeing 787 is the only technically airworthy aircraft flying at the moment, and there's only about 1,100 of those. But to their credit, Boeing did something about it, and that's safe aircraft. And I choose that to fly. If I go to Australia, I go on a Boeing 787.
And I just want to take a moment to read what it is we have here that is from blumenthal.senate.gov/newsroom/press release. For too long, dangerous cabin air events have gone underreported, underinvestigated, and unaddressed, said Blumenthal. Our measure gives the FAA the tools it needs to identify these events in real time, ensure they are properly reported and investigated, and take steps to prevent them from happening in the first place. Pilots, flight attendants, aircraft mechanics, and passengers deserve to know that the air they breathe is safe. And then finally, every American deserves safe, clean air when they fly. I'm deeply troubled by the reports of pilots, flight attendants, and passengers falling ill, and in some cases even hospitalized due to toxic cabin air. This legislation will hold aircraft manufacturers to a basic safety standard, protecting passengers and crew from harmful toxins, said Garamendi. What are your thoughts about this, about what they said?
Well, it's absolutely right. You can't change that. It's exactly what's going on. But with great respect, it's been going on for 70 years. So, and they know they can't fix it, but they just keep talking about it, really. And that's the truth of the matter. And all the unions are compromised in the UK. BALPA, Unite, they know they've got a huge problem, and they keep going to court, or it'll be next year or the year after. And the lawyers are just playing games with people's lives in the UK anyway. So I feel sorry for the unions that they're trying to keep their jobs, for the members, obviously. But this thing is just doing terrible damage to many of their people, no question. But it's the passengers I feel sorry for, the children. They rely on grown-ups, us lot, to sort of help them, don't they?
Absolutely. My question
Yeah.
is for, I don't even know how many tens of millions of people fly, how many flights there are just in the course of a year. Think how many people have not been impacted. How can we all come together to do something?
Well, good question. I think social media will destroy the industry. Actually, once people there's a law firm, Morgan and Morgan. You probably know the biggest lawyers in America. They've got a good website too. If you search toxic cabin air, they're just saying that people should be warned before they fly. It's that simple, really. Should be a health warning on any bleed air jet. That you're risking a dangerous exposure. So yeah, it's not rocket science. That's where it is now.
And we're
So
also
yeah,
sharing this website. The topic is holding airlines and aircraft manufacturers accountable for toxic cabin air.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it must be stressed that it's not on every flight. I mean, we've all been on flights where there's no problem. You get off, but I can assure you, there's some flights you get off and you'll be sick for the rest of your life. But they don't want to know about it. That's inconvenient for them, and it's huge amounts of money, obviously. So yeah, I agree that most flights are okay, but it's like an automobile journey or something. Every now and again you get a fatal accident. Okay, well, same in the airlines, but there's a huge number of injuries to people, and they just don't care really, and that's the only way they can deal with it. Just ignore it at the moment.
Well, unfortunately, it seems like in life, until it happens to someone you care about or to you,
Well,
people are like, oh, well, it's not
yeah.
going to happen to me. But so a question I have about this is you mentioned the dirty air event, I guess, where we actually can see that there's something in the air. Is that the only time that this is happening? Is it possible that we actually wouldn't see something?
Oh yeah, yeah. Samantha on her flight, they didn't know they were in a fume event. They just got to America and were terribly sick for a week, but they didn't know they had been affected at the time. Often it's invisible, and that's the sinister side of it. That'll be carbon monoxide, which is terribly dangerous. And you can't see it or breathe it, or know it's there. So that's the dangerous gas, really. Yeah, it's just awful, really, and. So yeah, you can be gassed and not even know it, and you'll probably think you got jet lag, and it's not jet lag; it's toxic air poisoning, or a part of it may be. I mean, yeah, I think the Dutch worked out there's 1 million people in Europe with aerotoxic syndrome in 2016. They did a survey of people and asked, well, how do you feel after a flight? So that's pretty good. And that's a lot of people. 1 million people in Europe alone have got aerotoxic syndrome. So, and they don't know it half the time, and the doctors don't know it, and it's all too difficult to diagnose, and it's it's totally inconvenient. If everybody challenged the airline over it, it would break the system, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I remember this year in 2026, there was an article I read about 4 people who went on vacation and they got carbon monoxide poisoning in their hotel. And it turns out, I
Right.
think 2 of them were Americans. I don't remember exactly, but people were up in arms like, oh my gosh, how does this
Yeah,
happen?
yeah,
And meanwhile, we're getting into planes every day and we're not even thinking about this.
yeah.
So
Well, he should be,
yeah,
yeah,
of
because
course.
it
Well,
happens in
hopefully
aircraft.
we're going to think about it now. So, a question that I have just from a day-to-day basis about what we can do as individuals, is there anything we can do before we get on a flight? Does wearing a mask, does that do any good?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my book in 2014, I worked out that if you put a carbon activated charcoal, mask on, you're going to keep the worst of the fume event out, from your lungs. And we started to sell them, and call them flyers friends. So I did that, but it doesn't keep carbon monoxide out of your lungs, but it'll keep the other stuff out. And so that's what you can do, really, just to protect yourself. Yeah, it's quite simple, really, because they won't filter their air, so you have to filter your own, really, to avoid it.
So, not just any mask, but a mask, is there a certain, how will we know if it has this carbon thing in it?
I think there's a website called Angel Fleet, and they sell face masks, so you can maybe find them there. And yeah, it was my idea in the first place. I have all the good ideas, but don't seem to be able to carry that out. I had dreams of making lots of money out of selling masks, but other people take it over from me and make the money. So there we are. But yeah.
So how can our audience help you specifically?
Okay, so we're completely broke, Samantha and I, that's what they do to you. And it's due to the cover up. So I need to make some money to sort of keep going. And I've got plans for flight simulators. That's what I want to do in the future. So, away from this, and I want to be an aviation historian and researcher and expert witness. So, but you need some money to do that. And that's where I am at the moment, completely. But I've been like this for many years with Samantha. So we kind of, and yeah, you do your best to sort of keep going, but that's the only way forward. I think it's a money thing, really. So I know what I want to do in the future. So it's just enabling that, I think.
So how would people support your initiative? How would they help you move forward by donating funds? Obviously, people can buy your books, but I've explained to my clients, book sales do not get us rich, I guess, unless we are a New York Times bestseller. But what are some other ways, aside from buying your books, that people can actually help you financially?
Well, I'm trying to set up a GoFundMe at the moment. It's very difficult. I think you're blacklisted by the community because you're dealing with some sort of strange thing, really. So, I haven't set up a GoFundMe yet, but that's the plan. But I just trust to fate, really, and just see what happens, But it's being able to sleep at night. That's the important thing for me. So, we're slowly getting it together. And the whole Aerotoxic Association, I couldn't make it work. The accountants couldn't understand it. They said, well, we don't understand what you're trying to do. Why do you want to make people better? And I said, well, because they've been made sick. And, so many accountants have just failed me, really. And, and lawyers too. I've got no time for them at all. So you try and do things on your own, really. And, that's the best way to do things, probably.
You've certainly been through a lot, and I hope this next chapter is going to be one that brings you peace and joy. When you look back, and I'm not someone who lives in the past, by the way, I don't like to look back, but if we were just looking back now, has it been worth it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, you haven't got any choice. I would never have gone flying jets if I had the choice. But, that's you don't have any regrets. I did do, and, it was a mistake, but I made the decisions at the right time for the right reasons. And here I am paying the cost, 20 years later. But that's the way it is. And, but life goes on, and I've got lots of projects, flying projects and other things to do. But you can't forget what nearly killed you and harmed many of my friends and colleagues. So, you just keep going, I suppose. And life works out in the end, I think.
I think what you just stated is so important, that even though it's come at a personal, professional, and financial cost for more than half of your life, you are not sorry that you did it. You don't have a regret.
No, but like anybody, you can't change what you've done in the past. You can only change what you're going to do in the future. So I know what I'm going to do in the future. So that's the way I look at it. So, and you just have a bit of fun. I read a book called The 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. I don't know if you're familiar with it, in 2006. And it tells you in 33 steps how to win a war. And Chapter 4 is the death ground strategy, where you just go for it, which is what we're doing at the moment, I suppose. And then chapter 22 is the exit strategy. And that's sort of telling you what to do in the future to get away from what you're doing and into calmer water. So that's where we are at the moment. But all 33 strategies are sort of working at the same time, and people just can't follow it. They say, oh, what are you doing? And I think, well, but that's how the life of an airline pilot is. I remember in 1984, my friend asked me if I could go out to Australia to fly firefighting aircraft. And I said, well, when do you want me? He said, well, tomorrow. I said, okay, I'll be on the next plane. So, that's how pilots are. We just do things quite spontaneously, really. If there's no other, reasons not to, you just do things. And that's how I've been all my life, really. And certainly with something like this, you have to be quite spontaneous and unusually different, I think, to get the result. But and then know when to stop, That's what I'm doing now.
Very good. Yes, setting a boundary. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this, because we are on the show Judgment, the Hidden Sin. And you alluded to the fact that in the United Kingdom, maybe you don't feel as comfortable as you'd like living there anymore. You're going to be leaving. But how do you feel you have been judged by people who have not believed you and not supported you and your initiative to help others?
Well, I've been let down by many people, obviously, family, friends, close friends. They don't understand it. They never will. But I don't care. It's my problem. And if they can't understand it, the documentaries we've made several, TV documentaries and so on. It's their problem if they don't understand it, but I don't, have a problem with their lives and question about why they did things. But one of my good friends has been, had severe illness for 20 odd years. Well, he might have been on a flight 20 years ago and he can't seem to work that out, but he might have been on the same flight as Samantha Sabatino and got the same neurological things. So, it's kind of, everybody's affected. Doesn't matter first class, business class, economy, it's across the board really. So yeah, there's huge amounts of illness out there and nobody knows why. And that's what's going on. And, nobody can fix it. So that's where we are.
And finally, John, my question in reference to this interview is, what would you say to someone who is going to board a flight and maybe has never heard of this before?
Well, just do your research and ask questions, but don't ask questions of the cabin crew because they won't know about it, or they're too busy to sort of give you a sensible answer. And how can they possibly handle it on the aircraft? You need to go right to the top and talk to the bosses of the airlines and get their sort of take on the whole thing, really. So yeah, it's just been incredibly sort of suspicious of anything, and just do your research, before you go, and but happy flying, most flights are okay. So, and we know that. So, it's just been balanced about it really, and not sort of been too dramatic about it because, pilots aren't. But we tell the truth, and everything that's written down and published is absolutely true. And it's just so galling to find out that the first BALPA conference in 2005 was to find the truth on page 1. That's why they did it. And then they found the truth and then they covered it up. So that's just awful, isn't it, I think? Yeah.
And to your point about the flight attendants and the pilots, they have a job to do. So when you're getting on a flight, please do not bombard them with a million questions. They represent the airline. This is their livelihood, and they have certain. So do your research. But John, if people want to get involved, what is it they can do to support moving this forward, even in the United States or outside the States?
Well, talk to your congressman or whatever, and the bill's there, isn't it? This Cabinet Safety Act, support it, and go for the solutions. That's what we're trying to do. And I've been quite frustrated because I've been chairing a group for the last 5 years, publishing solutions. But while there's no media, I think there's a D notice. You're not allowed to talk about this in the UK. It's covered up. So, that's the difficulty. So that's why I'm going to go to Australia. It's probably easier over there.
And just to highlight, we do have another view of the article. Again, it's from the 12th of August this year. And what is today? The 19th. It was from 1 week ago. Yeah. So if you're interested in more information, the article is here. You can contact, if you're in the United States, you can contact Blumenthal and Garamendi. And John, I really appreciate you being here today. And thank you for coming back to USA Global TV and Radio after, I think it's 4 years. And we do have your email address. Are you happy to share this?
Yeah, sure. That's my new business card. That's the airplane I used to fly, aerial firefighting. So that's
very nice.
There's a deliberate error on there. You need to find the deliberate error too. That's the challenge, which I like. And that's me, crop spraying, and me in 2007, and that's me now. And there's my email address and phone number, so don't hesitate to contact me.
Fantastic. So for those who are on audio only, it's JOHNHOYTE 787@gmail.com. John, thank you so much for coming forward, for sharing this story with us. And it really means a lot that you've come here to USA Global TV and Radio. What else do you want to share with our audience?
That's the airplane I used to fly. It's wingless now, but it's sitting in a car park in, not far from here. And it's quite difficult getting on it because I look down the back and I just see white smoke, from when I used to fly it. And that's what's going on. And if you put my name and Samantha Sabatino and Julian Soddy into Google, it comes up with, the evidence we sent to Parliament in 2007. So it's all on the internet if you know where to look.
It's all in the public domain.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I thank you for everything that you've done for
Well,
all
thank
this
you.
time, at least
Yeah.
20 years. And I really hope that the next 20 years bring you joy and
Oh, yeah.
happiness, and
Yeah.
that you can sit back and say, okay, I see that legislation was passed. I see that the airline industry is doing something, and it was all worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I work with many other people. I'm not alone, I promise you.
And is the best way for people to get in touch with you your email address, or is it some
Yeah,
other
sure.
way?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I used to have an Aerotoxic email, but I had that for 20 years, but I had to let go of it last year. So I've just gone back to one email to make it easy, really.
Okay, and everybody knows Gmail, so that's a good thing.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
thank you, Captain John. I appreciate you being here, and good luck with your initiatives and your move.
Thanks,
Take care.
Jacalyn. Great. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Okay.
Thank
Toodaloo.
you.
Bye.
Once again, bringing something to light, which is, please do not judge other people. Listen to what people have to say. Listen to their story. And whether it's something that you believe because you've experienced it, many times we don't believe things because it didn't happen to us. And then it happens to us, and oh my gosh, everything changes, doesn't it? So I'm really proud of John and all of his efforts that he has made. As I mentioned, he was here 4 years ago talking about this. He spent 20 years of his life helping to find some type of remediation for the airline industry to say, you know what? We recognize this. We are aware of this, and we're going to make some changes. Because I can tell you this, my father had lung issues and he could not breathe, and he was hooked up to a machine. And when you can't breathe, my friends, you can't do anything. And so if you are subjected to fumes and you're not aware of it, it might not hit you right away. But at some point, it's going to come and get you. So all I'm saying is do your research, like John said, put the judgment aside, and then take the steps that you can. Go and buy a mask that is effective in filtering out the carbon, if that's, I hope I got that right. And otherwise, write to your congressperson or persons, and wherever you are in the world, maybe there's a different process. But please to reach out to John. Here's his information again, JOHNHOYTE 787@gmail.com. If you feel like you've been judged and you'd like to share your story, please do reach out by going to usaglobaltv.com/book your session. And now we're going to hear from one of our dear friends and colleagues, Mr. Red O'Loughlin, who has written a new book called Aging Sucks. Take a look.
What if many of the problems we associate with aging are not random? What if there are identifiable causes behind declining energy, chronic disease, and memory problems? We have been told that aging is simply something we must accept, that slowing down is normal, that growing older means growing weaker. But what if that's only part of the story? Why do some people remain active and engaged well into their later years? Why do others struggle with disease, fatigue, and declining health? What is happening beneath the surface? What processes drive aging? In Aging Sucks, researcher, educator, and author Red O'Loughlin explores what researchers have discovered about why we grow older. No medical degree required, no confusing jargon, just clear explanations of what researchers have discovered about the processes that influence aging. You cannot stop aging, but understanding its causes may help you make better decisions about your health, your future, and your quality of life. Because understanding comes before action. Action creates hope. Aging sucks. End the guesswork. There is hope.
Every great story begins with a vision. At USA Global TV and Radio for years, we've been providing world-class education, entertainment, inspiration, imagination, connections, and hope. Most people don't stay to watch the outro or the credits, but it's the people behind every success, behind every breakthrough, and behind every unforgettable story who matter. The TV show hosts, our guests, our sponsors, our publicists, our production team, our distribution team, our search engine optimization team, and so many more. You're the ones who make the difference. Every great story belongs to the people who bring it to life. Our future looks bright at USA Global TV and Radio, and that's because of you, our loyal fan base all around the world in more than 60 countries. Together, we're making a difference because you matter. USA Global TV and Radio, live streaming to over 60 countries. Voiceover, Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Video production and direction, Paul Garcia. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV and Radio on YouTube.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.